Welcome to the fourth episode of the XC restoration. I said XW because I'm looking at the thing now. This one's taken a little bit longer to come out because we've had a bit of a family tragedy, if you like, with the death of my father-in-law, Susie's dad. It's been a pretty dreadful time. Lou was a terrific bloke. I lost my father at 19, but around about 10 years later I met Lou. And he always had a positive psychological effect on me and was always keen to come here in the garage to see what was going on. Even when I was challenged, he always had lovely things to say and made me feel terrific about the work I was doing. He died on the 13th of October, and two of his daughters, Leanne and Janine, and their husbands, Colin and Ken, came down from Queensland, and we all arranged the funeral together. It was a wonderful service, but a terribly, terribly sad time. So it was all unexpected, and we've all lost considerably. Now, people always bag their in-laws, but I tell you what, I've been the luckiest man alive with mine. Now, this episode is essentially sponsored by Paul Harker, and he's a fellow car buff. He's got his Holdens and his Fords. I think he's got a Group A Commodore at the moment. He's like me in that he has no prejudices between Holden and Ford. I've had my fair share of performance Holdens as well, and he's been very, very generous. And he's given me a couple of parts here. He's given me a horn, some door hinges, and the part that I was particularly pleased with, a pedal box. I'm just going to get it out of here. For my manual XC. So I am well and truly chuffed with that. Now, it's got a brake light switch on it. He sent it here in bits, so I've just sort of put it together loosely. It needs new bushes in it, but for the sake of a rattle can paint job, and a couple of new bushes, it's been absolutely free. And so, Paul, if you're watching this, I'd like to say thanks very much, mate. That's awesome. It means I don't have to buy one, and it avoids me, or at least I can avoid spending $300 or whatever people are charged for these things. Some people charge $250, some people charge $400, but whatever the case, they're very expensive. So, mate, thank you very, very much. So I'm going to start this soon. You only cut one bit of structure out of a car at a time. I don't want to cut too much out. And what I'm talking about, of course, is that great big hole in the firewall down there. You can see I've got a huge hole out of the firewall here. And part of the reason for that is because of where it's been ground. I'm not sure if you can see there's a little hole there. And that's where he's ground down too thin. And that was the story right the way around it. And of course, here's the other side. So that is a mess. But I've taken out all his dodgy work. Some of this was paper thin, and also some very, very important holes are blocked up. And so here's the part here, and of course they've blocked in the speedo hole, which is ridiculous. I don't know why they've done that. This is off an XB Falcon. Again, this is Jason's, and he got very cross with me because I cut through this part here, and he thought I should have cut right up the edges, and I didn't want to because my structure there is all very, very good. Now you can see here they've even blocked off where the heater mount is. Wait, Charlie, it's alright. It won't be a sec. This car had air conditioning, and the XB, where this one's from, didn't, and I'm not putting air conditioning on mine. You can see here, they're the standard heater hose holes for the XB, or the non-air conditioning cars I should say, where the air conditioned ones have a different heater core and it comes through there, and of course your evaporator's there. Now the air conditioning cars on the XCs also use vacuum assisted climate controls, if you like, knobs, and all your vacuum paraphernalia comes through that hole there. But none of this matters. He's blocked off where he's cut off and blocked where the charcoal canister goes. That's the air conditioning drain, so I don't need that. And of course he's also he's done a lot of damage. He's blocked off a lot of holes for the hydraulic lines and all this sort of stuff, and this car's going to have a clutch in it, so I'll need both sets of hydraulic line holes. So I've had to cut this down lower than the tunnel, which I didn't want to do because on the edge of the tunnel here he's blown through, and you can see light through parts of that as well. So it's a little bit unfortunate, but that's keeping me a bit... Now this horrible mess here is a little bit easier than I thought, or at least I'm hoping it's going to be easier than I thought to rectify. You can see the rust. The car that this came from was from the sea, and it was absolutely gone, but the good parts of it are the bits that I got. And you can see here in this area here, that plate, that reinforcing plate for the slave cylinders in really good nick, so I can take out the spot welds and attach that by itself. Now by placing this over the original firewall, and just that'll give me an idea of where the original one was. I'm not going to do the top because I've already done that. And of course we can just lift it off, and I know to give myself a good wide berth of where that line is. See, that's all alright down here, and that's the XB uses a different handbrake, so I wanted to keep all that, and that's not damaged. That's nice thick metal and it's all good. I'm just sort of going around looking for spot welds. I've just marked them up with a pilot drill so I can just bang through there to withdraw that bracket. That's the bit that I need, because the other one is absolutely minced. Pop that. Right, so there's just one more holding it. Just one more. Just there. There we go. That's the bit I need. Perfect. It's got the right size hole and the studs and everything, so I can use that in the XC, and it's all good. I'll just clean that up with a flappy disc and can weld it in. So I've drilled and cut this plate out, the one that was previously messed up, and I've sort of dummy fitted a slave cylinder there. It's all sort of loose, but that way I can sort of make sure it's all level before I weld that plate in. Very windy today. But anyway, now we've got the we're spending a lot of time getting all this right so that this drops, oh, isn't it wind, right down. It needs to be perfectly flush, and I've got a bunch of engineering clamps that I borrowed from work, so we need this to be dead level with no step at all, so that I can sort of get it right where I need it. Start between these clamps and tack it into place. And it's worth checking as we go. That's still sitting up. I've just got it there. It's spattery, but she'll be right. I'll go next to it, I think. And then I can sort of move the clamps up, but as I'm going to get out and have a good look to make sure that it's all still sitting where I want it to sit, because that's going to be very important to the overall finish of it. I'll probably go here too. Give me some little welds just to hold it down. We're up a bit here, so we can knock it down. Perhaps the best thing to do is just to move the clamp over. There we are. But it has to be dead level. So I'll just go along and tack it up like that. I'm going to get out now and go inside the car and just make sure it's all the way I want it, nice and level, and then I'll come back. Oh, missed. I'm just having to do little spots because a lot of it, it's very thin, it's easy to burn through. Oh, wind's blowing again. Right, I've got all this sort of all welded up. It's not as tight as I'd like, but it doesn't matter. It's very, very strong. This, if you remember, was all pulled off, and I've sort of tacked that along here, and that's as strong as an ox. And the same with this. There was a hole there sort of blocked off. I've got to sandal that back, or at least grind it all back. Now, I've got a bit of thin metal around here. but it's not thin all the way through, it's only thin in places, and I've sort of welded bits of it up. It's important to realise that, look, you can cut all this out and all this sort of stuff, but the less cutting out I can do, the better. I only want to sort of cut out what I really need to cut out. But I've got a fluorescent light in here, and I've got it underneath, and there's a couple of little pinholes which I've missed. Now, I can weld these up. I'm going to try and weld them up, and if I blow through, I can just hold that sort of bit of brass under there. You can see it sort of burn on the end, and that'll stop it blowing through. You use that sort of thing on really thin metal. But I can see behind the mask, if I can manipulate the light a bit, where the pinholes are. And the idea is to go around and try and eliminate them. It's very easy when you've got the light underneath. There's a tiny one there. There's one more, and it is in there. And so we can just get the grinder and run it off. But the other thing to remember with this gasless stuff is it leaves a slag like an arc welder. So you've got to get that on. I think I've got it now. I reckon I've got it. Bob's your uncle. And I haven't had to cut anything out. It's easy to be a bit overzealous and cut things out. I've done the parcel tray. I've got one nice long straight weld along there, and I've got it nice and flush, but the mistake I made was I actually put too much heat in, and what that's done is it's buckled the tray a bit, and that weld there's a bit down. But at the end of the day, it is stuck there for good, and so a little skin coat of filler on both of these will really do them the world of good. But I'd sooner repair what's there than cut it out. Michael told me that, the guy who's a very, very good welder. He said, don't cut out what you don't need to. So that's getting there. Now these cars are all sort of spot welded together. So what I've done is I've just got two bits of, it's 0.8 mil or 1 mil sheet stock, and I'm going to plug weld that in. And a plug weld's a sort of a substitute for a spot weld. So I want to do this and sort of show you the way I've been shown, and see what you reckon. Now this is just my dirty old CIG welder. I pretty much found it on the rubbish pile, and it's just got gasless wire in it. So I'm just going to cut that off and start on this. I can barely see what I'm doing. Alright, we'll see if that sticks. Another thing to note is you want a nice clean work area. Not one like that. That's a trip hazard. The other thing I should have mentioned was that of the earth. And I had this earth cable attached to those vice grips, and the vice grips were sort of clamped onto here quite tight, but these are actually rubbish. They're not good. Battery cables are firmer than that, so there are much heavier ones with a sort of a bolt in them that really do it. Make sure you get a good earth. But that's a pretty jaggy. You can see I've missed a bit there, but it looks like it's penetrated quite well. Now there's a test to see if these are any good, and we'll go and do it on the bench. And of course what we want to happen is we want to shear this off, and we want to take out the metal from behind. That way we know it's a good strong weld. I'll just stick this in here, and then we should be able to. It looks like it's hanging on quite well actually. I'll just go a bit lower down so it doesn't twist as much. Well, that was a bit of a fail, but it's absolutely ripped that out. So that's not bad. I mean, it really distorted the steel before it let go. Now if that was really, really bad, that would have just snapped off and left both bits intact. It wouldn't have distorted like that and hung on. So that's not too bad. Well, I'm just taking all this old paint off the firewall. The original car that this came off was sort of that pine lime colour. And they put some black enamel, so I need to get rid of all that enamel you can see sort of in these areas is it's a light skim of filler, there's not very much there. And what I've done is I've put the firewall in, and about every inch, 20 mil or so, I've plug welded it all around. And then on the inside I've gone right around it with one continuous weld. And I wanted it to have overlap because that's what the Vic Roads code says, that you have to have a certain amount of overlap. So it's sort of plug welded and also seam welded, and it's all sort of beaten nice and tightly around this tunnel area here. So you shouldn't be able to see any of that. So I've just got to continue here, get rid of all this paint. It's a bit laborious, and then I'll blow over it with a bit of edge primer. One or two teething problems with the XW I've found, and one is the temperature gauge isn't working properly because the sender's a bit faulty. I've just got to take it out and get another sender because it's less than 12 months old since I bought it. And also the fuel gauge isn't working, and the fuel gauge, I've checked the resistance at the wire at the gauge, and that's all good, so the sender's working well. But once again, I owe it to old Jason. Here's another gauge, and he's just given me that, so hopefully I can just sort of put it up and twist it in place and nothing else is sort of going to be in the way. But yeah, I've sort of scored there, which is really, really good. And of course, here's the car here in a fairly raw state, just back from the painters. Looks absolutely lovely. It's a little bit dirty. We'd only just started working on it then and laying the wiring out. Now it looks far more complete. He's got all the front on. There he is there, doing a little bit of work on the inside. I don't normally take photos of blokes from behind, but he's all part of the furniture there, isn't he? Of course, a beautiful car. It's going to be absolutely unique and exquisite. So you can see the firewall's in. It's a little bit blotchy because it's just got edge primer on it. Edge primer never looks very good. Just protects it from rusting. Pardon me, getting surface rust on it, like this sort of thing around there, and also up there on the plenum. Now, once that's primed and high-filled and sort of sanded back, that's going to look absolutely brilliant. I'm very, very happy with that. I've also put in this caster rod housing down there, or caster rod bracket, I don't know what you want to call that. Again, that's all from Jason, he's given it to me. Interestingly, I want to show you the old one, and it looks like it's been heated up and sort of squashed. I don't know why they've done that, but it's been filled. They've tried to smooth out the whole engine bay, and it's been... You can see the filler has actually all been basically cooked when they've heated up. I just do not know why they've done that. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. So rather than try and straighten that, I've put this new one in down here. So we now have our two caster rod housings in, which is cool. I'm happy with that. We've got the firewall in, and perhaps a little bit of smoothing off at the back of it, but that's to I've sort of had to weld right the way around it to make sure it's all kosher. And of course the parcel tray's in now. I have screwed up a little bit in this area. It's a little bit of a rise there, but overall I'm pretty happy with it. I'm pretty happy indeed. Of course, with this little bit of paint over, I can say, rightio, that's done, don't have to worry about it. These things here, that looks quite thick, but it's not. That's really quite thin. That's going to be all taken back and nice and smooth. I've made my mind up that I am going to put vents back there. And they're going to be dummy vents, so it's going to look like an XC. The vents will be nice and, you know, visible and all this sort of stuff. I'll probably end up putting a little bit of black underneath it there so you can't see the colour through it, but they're not going to be functional. And I will put other types of ventilation. And I just want to try and eliminate the opportunity for rust to come back again. This has to be dressed a little bit. There's a little bit of surface rust there, and of course cleaned up. That'll all be good. So I'm not worried about that at all. Got to put this in. Haven't even got to that yet. Made the part, but haven't done anything with it. Got to put got to repair these as well. That's still rusty. And I've also found a little bit of surface rust underneath the, around about where the A-pillar is. Might have to take the gutter off. I want to have a good look underneath there. And of course, the other thing I don't know about is this hole. It looks factory. They're really quite rough the way they do them. And it looks like it's been cut with a gas axe or something, but it has had little bits and pieces cut out of it over here. I think it's there, and also along the top there. So I might get the XD over here and lift it up and have a good look underneath it to see how it looks. There's a ton of work still to do. Of course, I have been slowed down. We've had an awful time with poor old Lou, and I'm going to leave it there. So in the next episode, I'd like to have the metalwork sort of finished. I did say that I wanted this car in paint by Easter, and I still think that's a very, very obtainable goal in terms of just the shell, not the hang-ons, just the shell, so I can plumb it, wire it, stick an engine in, that sort of thing. I'd like to have this car sort of in the later part of next year sort of movable under its own power, but that sort of remains to be seen how that goes. I've also ordered an endoscope to plug into my mobile phone. It was only a cheap thing online, and I want to have a good look inside the sills through these holes here, and of course I can get right up the front, although it's going to be a bit difficult where these people have lifted the car up with a two-post hoist and really squashed that area there, so that's going to need to be redone as well. But I need to get the endoscope. I want to have a look inside the sills and also some of the other areas behind here, for example, in the turret, so I can stick it up behind the headlining, or take that headlining out and stick it up behind that brace that's behind there. So I'm still waiting on that. And I'll include, hopefully I can take the footage off the phone and stick it on the video to show you what I'm talking about. But that's it for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Sorry about the delay, but there is more coming. So I'll see you later. Ta-da.